Let's cut the fluff. You don't need to text them. You don't need to chase. You don't even need to move on loudly. Because here's the truth. No one tells you. The greatest revenge on an avoidant ex is silence soaked in self-respect. Not words, not clapbacks, not closure. Just your absence, fully embraced, fully lived. You see, avoidants operate on a fragile illusion that they're always in control, that you'll always be available, that no matter how many times they pull back, you'll still be waiting like a safety net. And when that illusion shatters, it doesn't bruise their ego, it eviscerates it. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Translation: you don't destroy them by sinking to their level. You destroy them by rising so far above it, they can't even reach you emotionally. Your growth becomes the punishment. Your peace becomes the pain. Here's the part that stings them the most. You didn't rage. You didn't beg. You didn't even say goodbye. You just stopped reacting. That's the move they never saw coming. Because people with avoidant attachment feed off your reactions, your emotional outbursts, your desperate texts, your pain. It made them feel powerful. But when you go still, when you stop explaining, suddenly they're the ones spiraling. And I know some of you watching this are sitting there wondering, do they even care? Do they feel anything at all? Yes, they care the most when you care the least. They just won't show it. But trust me, while you're rebuilding, they're replaying. While you're evolving, they're regretting. Not because they lost you, but because you stopped needing them. Statistically, over 65% of avoidant exes admit, privately, that they felt the loss only after the other person went completely silent. That's not healing. That's ego damage. They didn't expect you to walk. They expected you to crawl. But you didn't. Instead, you leveled up so silently, so gracefully, they can't even hate you for it. And that is what destroys them. This video, it's not just about getting back at your avoidant ex. It's about stepping into the version of you they never believed you had the discipline to become. So, if you're ready to learn exactly what breaks their ego without a single text, watch this until the end, because by the time we hit point number 4, you'll understand why your silence is their karma. Like this video. Subscribe for more real talk like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear the truth. And if you want to support the channel and help us keep creating these unapologetic breakdowns, join our channel membership. Comment this mantra below: I don't destroy, I evolve. Say it with clarity, say it with confidence, because that's exactly what will haunt them the most. Let's get into it. Stay focused. You didn't block them. You didn't send a final paragraph. You just vanished. And that silence, that void, it doesn't sit well with an avoidant ex, because control, to them, is oxygen. And the moment you disappear without begging, explaining, or chasing, you cut off their supply. Avoidants fear emotional intimacy, yes, but here's the contradiction. They crave emotional power. They want to feel like the one who got away. So when you go dark without drama, it doesn't read as weakness. It reads as a shift in power. You're no longer orbiting them. You're your own gravitational pull. The Stoics understood this long before psychology put a name to it. Epictetus said, He who is not disturbed by anything external has found true strength. And that's exactly what happens when you stop reacting. Suddenly they don't know how to define themselves anymore, because your validation was their scoreboard. Their entire sense of superiority was built on the idea that you'd never truly leave. And now that you have, they're left staring into the vacuum you created, trying to convince themselves it doesn't bother them. But it does. Not because they love you deeply, but because they're losing the upper hand. You see, your absence strips them of something vital. They can't paint themselves as the one who moved on effortlessly anymore, because you didn't even give them a script to work with. No breakdown, no fight, no reaction, just calm, just exit, just silence. That's not how avoidants win. And when you take away their ability to feel superior without lifting a finger, you don't just bruise their ego, you... Let's get one thing clear. Avoidant exes don't expect you to evolve. They expect you to wait for closure, wait for their return, wait for them to suddenly become emotionally available. But when you flip the script, when you take the pain and you're no longer a memory they can safely look back on, you become a mirror reflecting everything they refuse to confront in themselves. See, your glow-up doesn't just bother them, it them, because it proves that the version of you they underestimated was just a draft. You were never the final product when they left. You were a blueprint, unfinished but full of potential. Now, fast forward, you're emotionally sharper, physically stronger, spiritually lighter. You're making moves without broadcasting them. You stop checking their stories, and why? Because your transformation, their comfort, and avoidants thrive in comfort zones. They don't want to be reminded that time passed and, while they just existed. Your healing confronts them with a question they hate asking themselves. This is deeper than attraction. It's about identity. They told themselves you were too much, too emotional, too dependent. But now you're self-possessed, quietly successful, focused. And that makes their original decision look foolish. Because you didn't fold. You didn't fall apart. As the great Seneca once said, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. So while they avoided discomfort, you used it. You didn't just move on, and that's the part that rips at their ego. Key point 3. Your indifference becomes their obsession. Here's the psychological irony no one tells you. The moment you stop caring, they start watching. Not when you're venting, not when you're posting emotional quotes, but when you're calm, quiet, unbothered. See, avoidant exes don't react to your pain, they retreat from it. But your peace, your indifference, that hits differently. Because suddenly you're no longer giving them emotional evidence that they mattered. You're not reacting to their passive attempts to trigger you. You're not reaching out just to talk. You're not playing into the dynamic they use to control. And when you stop feeding them attention, their mind fills in the blanks. Are you dating someone else? Are you really over it? Are you happier now without them? That uncertainty drives them crazy, because avoidants need one thing to keep their ego safe: predictability. They want to know you'll always be available, even after the damage. But when you detach without bitterness or revenge, you create a psychological tension they don't know how to resolve. They might not message you, they might not like your posts, but they're there. watching stories, checking your profile, asking mutuals. Not because they miss you the way you think, but because your indifference feels like rejection. And avoidant types may act like they don't care, but deep down, they hate being rejected, even if they were the ones who walked away. As philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner." But when you free yourself from that trap, you become the mystery they can't decode, the calm they can't shake, the chapter they didn't get to finish reading. And now they keep flipping back through pages, hoping you'll write a new ending. You won't. And that unresolved tension, that's how indifference becomes obsession, without you lifting a finger. A key point 4, your emotional control shames their chaos. Nothing crushes an avoidant ex's ego quite like you, mastering the one thing they never could: emotional regulation. Because for them, distance has always been the weapon, silence has always been the defense. They run from vulnerability like it's poison, because deep down, they never learned how to sit with discomfort without blaming or escaping. But when they see you calm, collected, composed, when they realize you're not falling apart, not venting on social media, not spiraling through rebound validation, they feel exposed, because you are doing what they pretend to do: stay emotionally stable under pressure. Here's the truth. Most avoidants are emotionally reactive, just in private. They suppress, deflect, and avoid accountability while maintaining a front. But behind closed doors, they wrestle with guilt, shame, and the emotional mess they pretend doesn't exist. And when you display calm detachment, not numbness, but true clarity, it puts that inner chaos under a spotlight. They can't say you're overreacting. They can't say you're too emotional, because you're not reacting at all. You're no longer arguing. You're no longer trying to make them understand your worth. You've outgrown the need to convince anyone who couldn't see it from the start. And that shames them more than any insult could. Because now you're in control, not of them, but of yourself. You control your mind, your time, your energy. You decide what deserves a reaction and what deserves distance. As Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Avoidance never mastered that space, but you did, and that makes you dangerous, not because you're cold, but because you're clear, not because you're vengeful, but because you're centered. They know they can't trigger you anymore. They know they lost the emotional high ground, and worst of all, they know you became the version of yourself they didn't believe existed. And you did it without needing their validation. Secret mantra: comment this if you're ready to reclaim your power. I control my peace, no one else. Not to flex, not to spite, but to declare that your healing is yours. And no one, not even an avoidant ex, gets to interrupt it again. Key point 5. Your absence forces them to confront themselves. The most brutal blow to an avoidant ex's ego isn't your presence, it's your absence. Not a dramatic exit, not a loud goodbye, just stillness. You disappear, not because you're playing games, but because you're done performing for someone who never saw your value until you took it with you. And that's the thing avoidants fear most: being left alone with themselves. See, while you're off healing, rebuilding and finding peace in your solitude. They're stuck in a loop where they no longer have access to your warmth, your effort, or your energy. At first, it doesn't hit them. They mistake your silence for a phase. They assume it's temporary, that you're somewhere out there still replaying everything, still hoping for their return, still waiting for breadcrumbs. But days pass, then weeks, and instead of you chasing, you vanish. No calls, no emotional posts, no guilt-laced messages trying to make them feel something. And that's when the panic creeps in. Not the kind they show on the outside, but the internal disorientation that starts to unravel them. Because for the first time, they're forced to sit in the silence they once used as a weapon. And now it's turned against them. Avoidants are masters of externalizing blame. They run from self-reflection. They tell themselves stories like, "You were too much. You wanted too much. You were the problem." But your absence destroys the entire narrative. Why? Because you're not there to blame anymore. Your detachment removes their excuse. They can't say you're dramatic when you're silent. They can't claim you're unstable when you've become emotionally grounded. They can't play the victim when the villain walked away without a word. So now they're left with something they've never learned to face: themselves. And that's where the damage really begins. See, when avoidants don't have someone to react to, they're forced to examine their own behavior. The ghost of your consistency haunts them. The kindness they took for granted plays in their head like a silent reel. They remember the way you made them feel safe, even when they pushed you away. They remember the stability you offered while they were busy creating emotional chaos. They remember how they walked away, assuming you'd always be there, but now you're not, and there's no one left to rescue them from their own reflection. You've become the absence so they can't escape. A shadow of what if that follows them everywhere. They try to distract themselves, maybe with rebounds, maybe with distractions, but none of it sticks. Why? Because distractions work best when the original wound is still open and you closed yours without them. Your silence becomes a psychological pressure cooker, because now they're in the position you used to be in, wondering, questioning, overthinking. And here's the cruel twist for their ego. They can't ask you for answers. They can't reach out without admitting they were wrong. They can't beg for closure from the same person they told to move on. That's the emotional hell avoidants never prepare for. You flip the dynamic without ever raising your voice. Without one single angry text, without saying a damn word, and yet they're the ones stuck in replay mode. While you sleep peacefully, they stare at the ceiling. While you journal, they scroll through your old photos. While you move forward, they remain frozen, because they thought distance would protect their ego, but your absence has done nothing but destroy it. As the philosopher Rumi once said, "Oh, don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." For you, that cure came when you let go. For them, the pain is just beginning, because they're only now realizing what they lost, and worse, what they pushed away. They never thought they'd miss you this way, not because they're in love with you, but because you no longer need them to be okay. And that, right there, is the final blow to their ego. You didn't destroy them by trying harder. You didn't destroy them by seeking closure. You destroyed them by disappearing into the version of yourself they never believed you'd become. Not out of spite, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. And that is what haunts them. You didn't yell. You didn't chase. You didn't beg for closure. You simply disappeared and became the storm they never saw coming. Because the truth is, you don't need revenge when you've mastered restraint. You don't need closure when you've found clarity. And you sure as hell don't need validation from someone who couldn't even face their own emotions, let alone yours. You've done what most never do. You walked away with your dignity intact. You turned silence into strength. And that silence, it's still echoing in their mind whether they ever admit it or not. But if you think the damage ends there, think again. Because in the next video, we're diving into something even deeper. Something most people never get answers to. What your avoidant ex really feels when you go no contact. It's not what they post. It's not what they say. It's what they bury, and it's tearing them apart from the inside. So if you're ready to understand the hidden psychology behind their detachment, the guilt they won't admit, and the exact moment your silence starts to haunt them, do not miss it. Tap that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss when it drops. Like this video to push it to someone who needs this message. Comment below, "My silence is sacred." And let it be your declaration. You've seen what your growth can do to their ego. Now let's expose what your absence is doing to their soul. See you in the next one. Stay calm, stay focused, stay dangerous.